So today we're going to talk about graphing linear equations by slope-intercept. So first, let's talk about what this word means, slope-intercept. So let's look at the 4 steps. It says use the steps below to graph an equation using slope-intercept form. So the first step, we have to make sure that the equation is in slope-intercept form. What does slope-intercept form look like? It looks like this. Y equals mx plus b. Y equals mx plus b. Okay, so the m stands for the slope. Remember we talked about that in the last notes. So m is your slope. So I'm going to say this piece, that m is my slope. Okay, and b is your y-intercept. So those are the 2 pieces we need to know. The y and the x stay in the equation. So this y and this x stay in the equation. The m is your slope and the b is your y-intercept. Okay, so look at number 2. It says graph. The first thing we're going to do is put it in slope-intercept form. So we're going to check that. This is slope-intercept form. Number 2 says graph the y-intercept. Which one's the y-intercept? B, this one. We're going to graph this point. Now it says this is always point 0, comma b. What in the world does that mean? Okay, if we have a point and it says the y-intercept, any y-intercept is going to have a 0 for x, isn't it? Because if we're looking like at this graph, and I told you this point, is that on the y-axis? Yes, that's on the y. Remember, this is the y-axis and this is the x. So that point would be 0, comma 2. Okay? This point here would be 0, negative 4. This point here would be 0, negative 6. Do you see the pattern here? What's your x in every single one of these? Your x in every single one of these is 0. Okay? So if we were going to look at this first one, what is my y-intercept? So it says graph the y-intercept. This point is always 0b. Okay, well, what's my b? Remember, this is the equation that we're looking at. We want to make sure it's in y equals mx plus b. Is it in that form? Yes, the y is by itself. The mx, this piece is next, the one with the x, and then the one without the x is the b, and that one's last, right? So what's my y-intercept right here on the screen? See how the next point was graph the y-intercept? What's my y-intercept here? Well, it says this point is always 0, comma b. So in this point, in this problem, my y-intercept would be 0. What's my b? Negative 1, right? So I would plot that first. That's going to be here. Cool, 0, negative 1, that's where that is. Remember, it always is x, comma y. So it's not over here, it's not this point, okay? 0 is your x. You're not going left or right. It tells you go 0. And then go down 1. So that's that point. If you're not sure how to plot points, ask me. This is the time to ask because we're going to be graphing in this unit. So I want you to know how to plot points. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, it says use the slope. Use the slope of the line to create more points. Remember, the slope is rise over run. Okay, what is my slope? This is my slope. Remember, the slope is m. So slope equals m. What's my m? What's my slope? My slope here is negative 3. So m equals negative 3. So first step, again, put it in y equals mx plus b. Is this in y equals mx plus b? Is this in slope-intercept? Yeah. Second, graph the y-intercept. Graph this point. You're going to go down 1 on the y-axis. Graph that. Third step, use slope. So we're going to start here. We're going to start at this point and we're going to do the slope. Okay, if my slope is not a fraction, make it a fraction. How do I make a whole number a fraction? I put it over 1. Does that change anything? No. but we need it to be a fraction. So what am I going to rise? So it's rise over run, remember? What am I gonna rise? I'm gonna rise a -3, which means I'm going down 3. Okay, if we rise negative, we're going down. Now I'm gonna run. So remember, we rise up or down first. Then we run to the left or to the right. What does a +1 tell me to run to? It tells me to run to the right, because going to the right is positive. I'm gonna make a point there. Okay. Now, what if I would have said, instead of -3 over 1, what if I would have said 3 over -1? Is that still the same thing? Yes, it is, and I'm going to show you why. If I divided 3 by -1, isn't that still going to give me -3 for my slope? Right? This is -3. This is also a -3, isn't it? And watch, it's still going to go in the line. So here, this is telling me, right here, this is telling me to rise a +3 now. So go up from your starting point. Remember, this was our starting point. From this starting point, go up 3. 1, 2, 3. Now, which way am I going to run? The negative tells me to run to the left or to the right? The -1 tells you to run to the left. So I'm going to make a point there. Do you see how this is still in a line? It's still in line with this point down here. Could I connect a line to these points and make a straight line? Yeah, that means you did it right. Either way we put the negative, we're still going in the same direction. All right, so I'm going to connect this the best that I can without a ruler. Okay, so that's it. That's how you graph it, okay? And look what number 4 says. Use a ruler, and I did not follow that step. Use a ruler to draw a line that extends through the points. Placing an arrow on both ends, that is so important. It goes on forever in both directions. You have to put an arrow, okay? You have to put an arrow on both sides. Okay, let's go back to number 1 and let's see if we can follow those same steps. The first step, write the equation in slope-intercept form. What's my slope-intercept form? Y equals mx plus b, this right here. Okay, let's make sure it's written in that form. Is this written in that form? Yes. Okay, how do I know? The y is by itself. The mx, this part, the x is right here, it's first, the x always comes first, and then the number without the x is on the very last piece, okay? Now this helps me look, okay, well what's my y-intercept? Remember the next step, it says graph the y-intercept. This point is always 0, b. How do I graph that y-intercept? Well, let's figure out what my y-intercept is. My y-intercept is 0, b. What's my b? My b is 5. So I'm going to put 5. This tells me my b is a +5. Okay, graph that first. So I'm going to graph 0, 5. Remember, we always do that on the y-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to plot a point right here. Now, what's my third step? It says use the slope of the line to create more points. Remember, slope is rise over run. So what's my slope in this case? My slope, now what number, my slope is always the number in front of the x. What is in front of this x? It's a negative sign, right? But if I make that, technically, I can't just say a negative. It's a negative what? It's a -1, isn't it? If I put a 1 here, does that change anything? No, there's actually a 1 there. It's just not necessary to put it there. So m equals -1. That's my slope. So from this point that we drew, we're going to find the slope. Now remember, it's always rise over run, so we need to make this a fraction. How do we make that a fraction? We put it over 1. If it's already a fraction, we don't do anything, but if we need to make it a fraction, we're going to put that over 1. Now we're going to rise over run. So we're rising -1. This tells us rise -1. From this point, we're going to go down 1. Then we're going to run positive. If we're running positive, we're going to the right. Okay, if we're running negative, we would have went to the left. So let's make a point right there. Now I'm going to do a couple more because I can't. It's going to be hard for me to draw a point like that. We can start, a line. We can start at this point and we can go down 1, over 1 again, make a point. We can start at this point and go rise -1, run +1, make a point. So you see how now we're making a line? Okay. Let's try to draw this straighter than the last one. Okay, so definitely on your test, oh my gosh, use a ruler. This is terrible. Okay, I'm actually going to get a ruler right now. Jeez, this book. Okay, so draw your line, make sure it's straight. What has to come on the other end of, there we go, of each part of this line? Arrows. Do not leave it like this. You're going to get it wrong in the test. You have to write arrows because that shows it goes forever in all directions. Okay, in both directions. All right, we did 2. Let's try 3 now. This one has a fraction, and in this case, fractions are not scary because we're not using them for the reason we usually do. Okay, so you don't have to worry about that. That's just your slope. So let's take a look. Let's look at our first step. Always go back to your steps. Make sure you're doing it right. The first step, write the equation in slope-intercept form. Okay? So let's make sure this is in slope-intercept form. Is that in slope-intercept form? Yeah. The x, it's y equals, the m is 2/5, and then the x is right next to it, plus b plus our 2. It's in that form. Okay, we can check off number 1. Number 2 says graph the y-intercept. This is always point 0, comma b. So my y-intercept, 0, comma b. Except instead of b, what can I write? What's my b? My b is +2, right? So 0, comma 2. I'm going to graph that point first. Remember, it's always on your y line. You're going to start at 0, 0, and you're going to go up 2. Now, the third step says, use the slope of the line to create more points. Right here, use the slope of the line to create more points. Remember, slope is always rise over run. So what's my slope? My slope is 2/5, 2/5. This time we don't need to put a 1 under it. It's already a fraction. But remember, slope is always rise over run. So from the point I just drew, from this point, I'm going to rise a +2, which means I'm going up 2, and I'm going to run +5. 2, 3, 4, 5. Make a point there. Okay? And if I wanted to, because you always want to do at least 3 points to make a line. Okay? So let's do, what if I made it this? Okay, look at the screen. Is -2 over -5 the same thing as 2 over 5? Are these the same? They are the same. Now let's think why. What's a negative divided by a negative? Isn't that a positive? So if I instead now went rise -2 and run -5, I should get that same line. So watch this. Rise -2, run -5. Do you see how if I make a point here, it's in line here with this? So either way, I want you to make at least 3 points to draw that line, okay? So we went up 2 over +5 and we went down 2 over -5. I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to make a line connecting those points. Put arrows on the end, don't forget. All right, next one. Okay, let's do y, let's make sure this is in, y equals mx plus b. Okay, that's the first step. Write the equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, cool, it's in that form, right? We have y equals mx plus b, we're good. Second step, graph the y-intercept. This is always point 0, comma b. What is your y-intercept? 0, comma b. What's your b? 3, right? The b is always at the end. The number without the x, it's 3. Let's graph that first. So remember, we start at 0, 0. We're going to go up 3. Make a point. Okay, your slope. Now we're going to look at the third step. It says use the slope of the line to create more points. Remember, slope is rise over run. Okay, so my slope, my m, equals -1/4. So rise over run. From the point we just drew, we're going to rise a -1. What does that mean? I'm going to go up 1 or down 1? I'm going to go down 1 because it's negative, and then I'm going to run a +4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make a point right there. Now what else can I do? Instead of going rise -1, I can rise +1 and then do a -4, right? Both of these are the same thing. There's still a -1/4, no matter which one you give the negative to. But you can only give it to one and not both. So I'm going to start here at my y-intercept. I'm going to go up 1, rise 1, and I'm going to go over -4. Make a point right there. Cool, now I have 3 points. I can draw a line. Make sure you put arrows on either side of it. All right, great. Now I want you guys to try 5 and 6. I want to see those, so try those before moving on. All right, try those before moving on. Then we're going to do number 8. And I need you to show me 5 and 6. I'm sorry. Yeah, 5 and 6. Oh, 8, 7. That's weird. Look, there goes 8, 7. Okay, that's fine. So here we have y equals, so let's make sure it is in y equals mx plus b. Now it is in this form, but what do you notice about the b? Is there a b? There's no b in this case. So what does b equal if there's nothing? If there's no b, it equals a 0. If I add a +0 there, that doesn't change anything. If I ever add any 0 to anything, it's not adding anything, right? It's adding nothing. So my b in this case, remember b, the first thing we did was we checked to make sure it was in slope-intercept. Now it says graph the y-intercept. This is always point 0, b. So 0, b, and my b this time is 0. So we're going to graph 0, 0 first. That's our starting point. Now the third step, again, says use the slope to create more points. Remember, the slope is rise over run. So my slope now, my m, for this case is -4. If it's not a fraction, remember I make it a fraction by putting it over 1. So I'm going to go down 4 to the right 1, make a point. Now remember, I can also go 4 over -1. That's the same thing. So now this time I'm going to rise +4, and I'm going to go over -1. All right, I made 3 points. I'm going to connect these points into a line. Put arrows on the end of it. All right, let's check to make sure. We're going to do 7. I want you guys to also do 9. Let's check to make sure this is in y equals mx plus b. Do you see how this one is not in y equals mx plus b? How am I gonna put it in y equals mx plus b? What needs to be first? Is the y alone? Yes, the y is alone, right? But why is it not in mx plus b form? Because the x is on the right-hand side. So all we need to do is switch these two. So watch, we can do this. Y equals 5x. Now be careful here. This is a really common mistake. 5x is a positive, right? 5x. And then it's -3 at the end. It's not a -5x. It's a positive 5x because this piece, oh my gosh, erasing everything. Okay. Because this piece is a +5. That sign in front means it's positive, and a -3. So when we switch it, it's 5x minus 3, okay? Now it's in y equals mx plus b. Let's graph the b. That's our first step, or our second step after we get it in y equals mx plus b. Our b is 0, whatever our b is. Our b in this case is -3. So 0, comma, negative 3. We're going to graph that first. Here's 0, negative 3 right there. From there, we're going to do our slope. Now our slope is positive 5. But remember, we put it over 1 when it's not already a fraction. So we're going to rise 5 and run 1, make a point. Now this one, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, make a point. Okay, I think this one's going to be hard to do 2 points because I think we're going to get off the graph, but let's just try. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then make a point up here. So if it goes off the graph, you don't have to make 3 points, but since that didn't really go off the graph, it only went off the graph a little bit, so we can fit that. Okay, arrows on both sides, don't forget. Okay, try number 9. So on the first page, 5, 6, and 9, you're doing those on your own. Okay? All right, now on these, we do not have, it is not in y equals mx plus b, and it's going to be a little harder to get it in y equals mx plus b. So let's take a look here. The first step, we need to make sure it's in y equals mx plus b. So this is all over the place, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Our goal here is to get y alone. Our goal is to get y alone, okay? So I'm going to do this over here. X plus 3y equals negative 3. Our goal is to get y alone. Circle or box the y. This is my goal right here, to get this alone, okay? So if I want to get that alone, that means that I need to get rid, I'm going to draw a line here. I need to get rid of this x. This guy should not be on that side, right? It needs to be over here. It needs to be on the other side of y. So my first step is to minus the x from both sides. Okay, what's x minus x? If I give you x and I take away x, there's nothing left, right? That's 0. So that cancels out. We're left on the left-hand side with 3y. Box this guy again. Okay? Equals. Now, can I combine these two terms? I cannot because one has an x and one has no x, right? So let's try to get it in this. Do you see our goal here is to get it into y equals mx plus b? So which one do you think I'm going to put first, the x or the 3? I'm going to put the negative x first and then put minus 3 because my goal here is to get x alone, right? Okay. Sorry, it's not to get x alone. It's to get x first. So I want my x term to be first. Okay, last step. To get y alone, why is y not alone right now? Because of that 3 on the outside. So we're going to divide each side by 3. Now, on this one, we're going to divide each term by 3. Don't do it, just do each term. So we're dividing the first term by 3, the second term, and the third term. We're doing this, we're going to do this a couple other times. You're going to have plenty of practice with this, okay? So here, this cancels. What are we left with? Because 3 divided by 3 is just 1, right? So I have 1y left on this side. Now, negative x over 3 can be written like this, and I would tell you strongly to write it like this. Negative 1 over 3x. Isn't this, if I took like this guy out, wouldn't that be a negative 1 over 3? Right? Because remember, there's always a 1 in front of the x. We can't see that 1, but there's a 1 in front of it. So this whole term, this is just 1/3, negative 1/3. And I'm just going to stick the x on the outside of it because now my slope is easy to see. That's why I did that. Now, what about this? What's negative 3 divided by 3? It's negative 1. Don't say 0. Negative 3, any number divided by itself, 100 divided by 100, negative 5 divided by negative 5, negative 3 divided by 3. Okay, any number divided by itself is a 1. This case, it's a negative 1 because we have a negative in front. Now it's in y equals mx plus b, right? What's my first step, or my second step after getting it in slope-intercept form? This is slope-intercept form. We got it in that form. Now we're going to graph the y-intercept. This point is always 0, comma b. So That means it's 0, comma, -1. My b is -1. I'm going to graph that first. What's my third step? My third step is use the slope to create more points. Remember, the slope is always rise over run. So -1/3 rise over run means from this point I'm going to rise -1, which means I'm going down 1, and I'm going to run +3. Make a point there. Okay. Now actually I can keep going with this. I can start from here again and go down 1 over +3, make a point. Okay. What else can I do? I can also go up 1 and go over -3. So let's try that. From this point, up 1 over -3. Perfect, make a point. Great, let's draw a line. Use my ruler. All right. I didn't do as good of a job that time. Kind of didn't get all the points. Okay, cool, let's try 11. So 11, I'm gonna rewrite it over here because I know it's not in y = mx plus b. So I need to get what alone? I need to get the y alone. My goal is to get this guy by itself, right? How do I get y alone? My first step is subtract x. That's what we did on this side, right? We subtracted x first. That was our first step. Same thing, subtract x. If I give you an x and then I take away an x, how much do you have left? Nothing, right? This cancels. What am I left with on the left-hand side? I have a -y, right? Equals. Now, which one am I going to put first? I want it to be in y = mx plus b. So I'm going to put my x term first. I'm going to say -x minus 5. I'm going to put that x term first. Okay. Now, is this done? Are we done? Y = mx plus b? We're not, because of that negative in front of the y. How do I get rid of that? Well, there's a 1 right here, right? So I'm going to divide each term by a -1. Remember, -1 and y, when they're right next to each other, they're multiplying. The opposite of multiplication is division. So that's how we get to the other side. -1 divided by -1. Remember, anything divided by itself is just a 1. So we have 1y left. And we don't have to, we can do that, but we don't have to. Usually we just see it like that. Okay, what's -x divided by -1? Now, that might be weird, but watch. We can put a -1 there, right? What's a -1 divided by a -1? It's just a +1, right? Remember here, -1 divided by -1, we were just left with y. Same thing here. We're just left with x. That cancels, right? It's the same number. If you have the same number over itself, that cancels. It's just a 1. Now, what about -5 divided by -1? That's going to be a +5. Great. Are we in this form now? Are you in y = mx plus b? Yeah. So the second step, that's the first step. The second step is to get my b term, so I can graph that, right? So my b is, remember, it's 0, comma, whatever your b is. What's your b in this case? It's always the one without the x. It's 5. So I'm going to graph 0, 5 first. Okay. Now my next step, my third step, is to get slope. What's my slope? Well, my slope, what's in front of the x? There's a 1 there, right? So I'm going to say my slope is 1, but I need to make it a fraction. How am I going to make that a fraction? I'm going to put it over 1. Remember, with slope, we're doing rise over run. So I'm going to go up 1. I'm going to go up 1, and I'm going to go over +1, make a point. I'm going to go up 1, and I'm going to go over +1, make a point. Okay. Can I also go down 1 over -1? Yeah, that's still a positive, isn't it? Negative divided by negative. So I'm going to go down 1 over -1. See how it still goes in that line? Okay, I have enough points now. Let's draw this graph. this line, I mean. Okay, I'm gonna make arrows on both ends. All right. I want you guys to do 12 and 13. We will do 14 and 15, okay? Last two. So 14, we have to get it in y equals mx plus b. That's our first step. I know you're probably like, Miss Earl, oh my gosh, I get this, but I'd rather have you say you understand it than to say you're confused. And if you're still confused, that's okay. We have a couple more to do. And if you're still confused, please ask me. That's okay. 2x plus, no, not plus, minus 4y equals 20. Is this in y equals mx plus b? Definitely not. What is the first step? Box what you're looking for. I want to get that y alone, right? This guy needs to be alone. It's a weird circle. This guy, that y needs to be alone. So if I want to get that alone, what's my first step? I'm going to subtract 2x. Remember, we always subtract right here. Here we subtracted the x first. Here we subtracted the x first. This time we're subtracting the 2x, right? We just want to get the x to the other side. Okay, this cancels. If I give you 2x's and I take them back, you have nothing left. We have a negative 4y. Okay, we didn't change that. Now, can I combine these two terms? I cannot. 20 minus 2x, they both, one has an x, one does not have an x, so I cannot combine those. But I need to put it in this form. So what is going to come first, the negative 2x or the 20? Negative 2x. We want to keep that first so that we're almost there in this form. The only reason we're not there is because this negative 4 is in front of that y. How do I get rid of that negative 4? I'm going to divide each side by negative 4. Now each term is being divided by a negative 4. This cancels. We have a y left. Y equals. Okay, you guys, please look up here and pay attention. On this piece, first of all, what's a negative divided by a negative? A positive, right? So I'm going to say 2 over 4 x. Now what's this piece? 20 divided by negative 4? That's a negative 5. Okay, do that in your calculator if you're not sure. Now the one thing that we have to do, just like we were doing on last time's homework and notes, we have to simplify that. That's not simplified. What's 2 over 4 simplified to? Now the answer is not 2. It is not 4. This is, okay, 4 over 2. This equals 2. If I take 4 of something and I want to divide it in 2 equal pieces, there's 2 different pieces, right? 4 divided by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. But 2 over 4, when you have a smaller number on top than you do on the bottom, it's a fraction. So this is how we simplify. Divide each side by, divide top and bottom by 2. Both top and bottom can go into 2, right? So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 1/2. It's not 2. It's 1/2. Okay? Cool. So y equals 1/2 x minus 5. All right, let's graph this. What am I going to graph first? I'm going to graph 0, b. What's my b? Negative 5. So 0, negative 5. Should not be there. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make a point. Okay. My third step. What's my slope? My slope is 1/2. So rise over run. I'm going to rise from my point. I'm going to rise up 1 and go over positive 2, make a point. Up 1 over positive 2, make a point. Now I can draw that line. All right. Last one, and then we'll be done. Okay, now this one's a little different. So is it in y equals mx plus b? Nope. That's the first step, so we're going to get it in that form. So to get it in that form, box your y. Box the term you're trying to get alone. I'm trying to get that y alone. What do I have to do first to each side? I have to subtract 2x from both sides. If I give you 2x's and I take 2x's away, how many do you have left? 0, right? Now we're left with, on the left-hand side, we have a 3y still. Box that y. That's what we're trying to get alone. Equals, now I have a 0 and I have a negative 2x. Remember, I want to get it in this form, so I'm going to put the negative 2x first. I'm going to say negative 2x plus 0. Do you have to plus 0? No. If I add 0 to anything, remember, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to take that 0 away. Because if I can take it away and I can put it there and it doesn't change anything, right? So I'm just going to make it, I'm not going to have a 0 there. Now how do I get the y alone? Divide each side by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. I have 1y left, and I have negative 2/3 x, or negative 2x over 3. Okay? Now, do I have a b term? Remember, my second step is to graph the b. I don't. So remember, when I graph b, when I graph my y-intercept, it's 0, comma b. If I don't have a b here, remember that plus 0 that was up there? That means my b is 0. So when we're doing this and we're doing 0, comma b, it's 0, comma 0. So when you don't have a b term, when there's nothing over here, you're just graphing it, you're starting at 0, 0. Now we're doing rise over run. Well, my slope is negative 2/3, so we're going to rise negative 2, and we're going to run positive 3 from the point that we have. Rise 2. Oops, I just said rise negative 2 and I went up. Rise negative 2, run 3, make a point. Okay, rise negative 2. Oops. Rise negative 2, run 3, make a point. Great. Now I can draw my line and be done. So I want you guys to do numbers 12 and 13. And 5, 6, and 9, okay? So try those, show them to me. When you're finished, you can start on your homework.